We'll look at how to capture media from a VTR in this tutorial. To access the VTR controls on the dashboard, there is simply a VTR tab. There are two things to point out on pressing the VTR tab. Firstly, I've got my Mistika set to a single interface monitor. So in fact my timeline has been replaced by the media browser because the VTR capture window and the media browser work in tandem. If you're working with a preferred setup with two monitors for your interface, then as usual the media browser will be on your right hand side and your timeline will still be here. The other thing we notice is a warning that's come up saying that there's no video or audio signal, and what that's telling me is Mistika is not finding an appropriate video signal coming to its SDI input ports. That's actually completely understandable because I don't have anything connected, so I'll be slightly faking this tutorial, but this is a very useful check because this will be able to tell us whether we've got our VTR correctly wired up to Mistika. Also, the moment we go into the VTR capture tab, as we are now, actually our external video monitor will show what's coming to the input of Mistika rather than the output of Mistika. So we'll be able to get a confidence check that we are actually going to be recording something. Now a little note here is that this warning signal is telling us that the video signal is not detected. There's actually another reason why it might tell us that, other than the fact that we simply haven't connected a VTR. It's very important that the format the VTR is playing is absolutely identical to the format that Mistika is currently set to. As you recall, before we start a Mistika session, we normally go into mconfig and choose a particular format for us to master in. And in fact, these presets simply populate many choices throughout these tabs, one of which is on the video I/O board. So the important thing here is that the playback format of the VTR must exactly match this format. And it must be exact. For example, here I can see I have a 1920 by 1080 by 24i, or 24p, or 24psf. The playback format of the VTR must match exactly, so it wouldn't be good enough to have 1920 by 1080 by 24p if actually I have the video board set at PSF. The result would be that Mistika would tell you that there's no video input detected. So if you're coming against that error, just double check that your VTR and Mistika agree with each other. While we're on this tab, we also have Use Video Board. Obviously, in order to capture from a VTR, you'll need a video board installed. And in almost all circumstances where a video board is installed, you'd have the Use Video Board on. If you turn it off, or don't have a video board installed, then rather Mistika will try and capture via a FireWire port. Don't forget that if you make any changes to the mconfig settings, then you'll just need to save your settings and restart your Mistika software for the changes to take effect. So back to the VTR tab. We can see, as with other tabs, we have some sub-settings. At the moment we're only interested in VTR capturing. This tab we would use to play out from the timeline, we'll look at that later. Then the VTR setup, the manual explains these pretty well, but obviously we have a pre-roll setting we might want to adjust. And the edit lag is a figure that we can change if we find that when we capture, our captures aren't exactly frame accurate. So looking at the VTR capture window, on this side we have a fairly obvious VTR control with a timecode readout, our usual shuttle controls, and a wheel we can drag around. And obviously, assuming that our VTR is under serial control, we can have remote control of the deck. We can choose whether the wheel is a shuttle or a jog, and in fact simply clicking one of them will just alternate. We can mark in and out points, and they'll go into these windows here, in and out, and obviously we can send the deck to those in and out points. Everything in these parts are to do with what media we're creating and where we're going to store it. So up here we have our usual in and out points, which we can set directly from mark in and mark out, or we can type into the boxes, or we can drag. This keep function here is quite useful because if we were to set a particular duration and press keep, then notice as we drag our in point, our out point is dragging as well, so that our duration remains constant. When we capture some media, we need to just give it a name. Just something we can refer to it from in the media browser later. And of course we can add in any comments we like to. We can also specify the tape ID, which can be alphanumeric. Also, when we're setting our capture details, we can choose which channels we're going to capture, whether we're capturing video, and which groups of audio channels we're selecting. This sometimes causes confusion because it's not obvious how we capture, for example, just audio channel 1 or audio channel 3. The way Mistika works is it'll actually capture multiple stereo pairs of audio, and then it's within the audio routing that switches off the channels that we don't want, and that's actually done automatically when you conform an EDL. So for example, on A2 this would create stereo audio capturing channels 1 and 2 from the VTR deck. This would capture audio channels 1 through 4, and this would capture audio channels 1 through 8. And as I say, we'd simply then use the audio routing as we saw before to select any particular one or set of those sub-channels if we wanted to. We can also tag a clip as being interlaced or not. It doesn't make any difference directly to the capture. It's just a tag that's assigned to the clip. Over here we can decide what format we're going to capture our media as. So we can capture our media directly as DPX files, perhaps for compatibility with other systems, or even to Avid compliant DNX HDs. The default file formats will be JS files. Now a JS file is a Mistika internal format. It's effectively an uncompressed movie format, but it's optimized to run in real time. So by and large, when you're capturing, you'll almost always be capturing to JS files unless there's a very specific reason that you don't want to. And those specific reasons would normally be that you're capturing perhaps on behalf of another system. As you can see, there's 4 flavors of JS files, generally broken down into whether they are RGB or YUV. Then the ones with the underscore 10 say whether they are a 10-bit format, the others are an 8-bit format. In fact, which one of these comes up as default is actually set on the same mconfig tab that we just looked at. As an example, if you were capturing from, say, HD Cam, JS-YUV 42210 would be the most likely thing you'd want to capture to. On the other hand, if you were capturing from HD Cam SR in 444 mode, then you'd want to be capturing in the RGB mode. So this would also entail the difference between single link and dual link on your input video board. The drop-down boxes here dictate where this actual media is being stored. They're a drop-down box, but at the moment I have no other options. I can build other options in the path builder in mconfig. If you're using Mistika in a standalone environment, it might be that you'll simply always use defaults. The path builder allows you to build dynamic paths. For example, if you want your media for a particular project stored in a particular location, you can build up any number of predefined storage paths, then you can just select here. And same for audio. The status down here is just a readout, just a method of Mistika telling us what it's up to. Target folder here is actually for the clip file that Mistika will create. You'll remember that when we import movies or graphics, we create a link file. And that link file is a small piece of metadata that sits in our media browser that simply directs Mistika to where the real media is actually stored. Well, a clip file, which comes up in green in the browser, is pretty much identical in that it points Mistika to a piece of media. The only difference between a clip file and a link file is that links are generally associated with external assets, movies, audio files, graphics, whatever perhaps that you've been supplied with. clip files, on the other hand, relate specifically to pieces of media that Mistika has created itself, either via capturing or via rendering. So this target folder just says where it's going to store those clip files, and if we want to change it, we can just simply select in the media browser and you can see it updates. Available time is a dynamic number that simply divides the size of our available storage by the format that we're currently capturing in. So in other words, it's telling me I can capture just over 5 hours in my current format. Once we've set our particular details for our clip, this would be the big button we press to initiate that capture. So if I were to press this and I was connected to a VTR, Mistika would enter into a pre-roll to get to here, carry out the capture, storing the video in this format. Then once that process was finished, in my target folder I'd have a little green clip file that I could just take onto the timeline and start working with. If a capture is underway and I decide not to go ahead with it, at any point I can abort the capture. Start free and stop free is to do with free recording. Rather than setting up an in and out point and then using serial control of a VTR to arrange a capture, start free will simply start recording whatever's going to the video input of Mistika, whether it's a VTR or a camera or another system, and obviously stop will then complete that capture. Under here we can set batch captures, so we can create a list of captures and ask Mistika to simply go and capture them all together. So for example, if I were to press create clip now, we can see that up here we've created one of those green clip files I was talking about, but in fact it's an empty piece of media because we've not captured anything. But it has all our details here of our in point and our out point and our tape name and so on. So I could build a list of these clip files and ask Mistika to do many together. So what I could do is simply create new clips with different names, and as you can see I can build a list. Now incidentally, if I ended a capture with a number, Mistika will auto advance it. So I give that a different time code, create clip, and you can see it's already gone on to 002, ready for me to do another. So I can build a quite quick list this way. So then, having built a list of clips, I can simply select whichever ones I want. So for example, shift click to select a group, and then down here I can say capture selected. So now Mistika will simply go through those clips, capturing one at a time. I can abort the captures, which will cancel the capture of anything that it hasn't done already, or I can skip the current capture event, which will just abort the current event and just jump onto the next one and carry on. Once the captures are done, Mistika has the ability to launch an external user-defined script. There are a few examples already in the system, for example one to send an email after the captures are complete, and the manual explains where to install your user-made scripts if you want to do anything specific, for example to automate workflow processes. And finally down here is a drop-down list of recently captured events for easy access. If we want to edit any of these events, we can simply double-click and those parameters are reloaded into the VTR window. For example, if I double-click here, we can see that now we've got all our parameters back. So if I was to make an alteration, set the in point to 1 perhaps, and now if I created clip, Mistika will warn me that that clip name is already in use. So I'll simply say OK to overwrite, and now we can see that our in point has changed. So that's how we use the VTR window for manual and semi-auto capturing, and in the next tutorial we'll look at auto-conforming. There's just one additional thing to look at, and that's how we deal with capturing 3D tapes, stereoscopic tapes from an HDCam SR deck, for example, that have left and right streams. So going back to our mconfig and the Video I/O tab, we have a Video I/O mode here, and at the moment it's set to YEV422, which basically means on a suitably equipped video board it's simply going to take a single link from import 1 On the other hand, if I set it to RGB 444, it will take a dual link input from inputs 1 and 2. In between, there's Stereo 3D, which configures the card to take a separate left and right YUV stream from inputs 1 and 2. So I'm just going to come out of the mconfig, and I'm going to quit Mistika, and then restart it, just so that those settings change, so we can see the change in the VTR tab. So now we can see that these options have appeared, which allow me to enable or disable stereo capturing, and to enable whether I'm just capturing from the right eye or the left eye. When capturing left and right together, Mistika is able to create a single clip on the timeline that holds both the left eye and the right eye information. We'll have a look at that in more detail in the stereo tutorials.